Okay, now we're going to take a look at the monster editor and see how it slightly differs from the game object editor. I made a little tile set here with one of the little creatures. It's a monster tile set. It's monster tile set 0. Now if I go to monster graphics banks and I go to monsters, you'll see it looks very, very, very similar to the game object editor. There's a couple differences. One, it behaves a little bit more like the tiles. If you remember, when we had tiles and you had assets selected, you were creating new tiles. And if you wanted to edit a tile, you clicked on a tile and you would hit update, and then it's working on that exact tile. If you wanted to start making a new one again, you go back to assets and now you're creating a new one. And this is great for like rapid development of assets. The same thing with monsters. All right, so right now I need to save it in order for it to keep the changes. Let me make a quick monster, basically exactly like I made the player. Now this is using the player palette. I'm going to need to make a monster palette here. This should be called game object pal. I'm not sure why that didn't rename. But this guy here, I'm gonna call this monster pal 1. And I'm going to make his skin tone yellow and his outline dark blue and his eyes white or red or yellow or something. So now this is kind of what he's going to look like. And I use the animation tool and I use the animator to set up animations, managing animations the exact same way. I create animations in the exact same way. I can use the flips in the exact same way, copy, paste, flip frames, all the things. So I can make a 2-frame monster, and I could go to frame 1, copy it, go to frame 2, paste it, flip it. So now I get a little monster that does that, you know, and maybe I call this animation walk down. And now I can go into object. Now I want to save this. Okay, so before I forget to and click off of this and erase all my updates, I'm going to save this as bug, and I'll save it. And you'll see I get a little plus sign next to monsters. Right now, I am working on a new monster. If I were to hit save again, and let me make a change here so you can see the difference. If I were to hit save again, I'm not editing the monster that's there. I'm saving a second monster. Just like with the tiles, I was able to iterate fast. If I want to work on the monster that I've saved, I need to click on that monster. And now you can see the save button's gone. Any change I make now is automatically saving, and I'm working on this particular monster. So I'll go into object details now, and I set up my animations the same way. So, you know, I might want to make this object or this animation called walk or move or something like that, and I can make an idle, and I can make the directions and tell it what direction. Maybe this guy only ever faces forward, in which case all his directions show the down facing sprite, but probably I have different directions for different animations for different directions. With his details, this guy is a monster, so I need to make sure and click monster. And what's nice about this is if in the player you have it set up where it's a player, and in the monster you have it set up where it's a monster, the engine that's underneath it already knows what to do with that information. It already understands that when the monster runs into the player, it takes away hit points, and if the if the hit points are gone, it kills the player and all that stuff. It already knows how to do that. So so you don't have to worry about handling collisions between monsters and players. That's why we have these, so it can read, okay, what kind of object am I running into? Should there be a collision? Should there not be a collision? And that's what this stuff is actually doing. It doesn't observe strength and defense right now, but it does observe health. So if you develop a way to attack the monster, it will observe health. Like if you develop a projectile, so if I give him 5 health, it'll take 5 shots to kill him. And it does observe experience. Kind of. Right now, it only sees one place of value, so 0 through 9. Don't worry, that's going to change. I just need to have some time to get into that code to fix it up. But right now, if you give him an experience worth of 5, when you kill him, you'll get 5 points, and that'll go towards the variable score. So the other things that we need to set up that we didn't need to set up with the player we need to set up a solid reaction. And for most cases, I'm going to recommend reverse direction. So basically, when this monster gets to the edge of the screen, he's going to turn around and move the other way. If it's a projectile or something that's supposed to look like it keeps going off the screen, I'd probably want to put destroy me. That means when it gets to the edge of the screen, it goes away. So reverse direction, and same thing with the edge, reverse direction. And don't worry about hurt reaction or spawn type right now. I do need to give him a speed if I want him to move. So give him, I'll just have him start moving right away. There's no acceleration. He moves at about the same speed as my player does. Awesome. In this actions window, in this dialog box, your monsters can have up to 8 action steps, and if you're really smart, you could figure out ways to actually make it appear that there's even more. But for right now, what I want to do is I want to look at action step 0. This is where this object's going to start. When it starts, it's going to be showing the walk type animation. And what's it going to be doing? Right now, it's not doing anything. So if I want him to do something, like I want him to start moving in a direction, I would pick something. I would pick one of these. I'd say, okay, he's going to start moving in a direction. And that's going to keep going. And right now, there's a timer that gets set. So as soon as it starts, he goes to this animation, he does this action, and it sets a timer for whatever this says. And if you choose 0, it's actually a random timer. 1 is a really quick one, and the higher the number, the longer that timer is. So let's say I want him to have a random timer. He's going to move in a random 4 directions. And okay, so now what do I want to have happen when this timer goes off? Right now, it's just going to loop, so it's going to do this again. And when it gets, it's going to do this again. Not even repeating it. It's just not going to do anything. It's going to skip any behavior. So if I want it to do something, for instance, if I want him to change direction, I need it to enact this code again. I would hit repeat, and now he's going to be walking. He's going to choose a direction. When that timer goes off, his action timer, he's going to repeat that action. So it's going to end up in a loop of whatever action I have loaded into here. Or I could have it advance. If I have it advance, it's going to this frame, which what do I want to have happen? Maybe I want him to stop moving. And when he stops moving, at the end, it sets a timer, and at the end of that action, he goes to first. So, these are things that are happening at the end of the action timer. So right now, he would start moving. He'd pick a random direction. When the timer goes off, it would advance to the next action. He'd stop moving, set a timer. When that timer goes off, he goes back to the first animation. So we've got this nice little loop set up. And I want him to animate here, but not when he stopped. So what I could do is I could say with his action step, when he's moving, when he's set to move, I want to give him an animation speed. Now 0 means no animation, by the way, but this is the fastest he can go, and this is the slowest he can go. So as far as animation, so I'm going to put the animation to 4, and for when he stopped, I'm going to put the animation to 0. And what I could also do is, let's say I want another frame that had like a shooting animation. At the end of his animation, I want something to happen. It's never going to get to this right now, but if I had a shooting animation, I could choose the shooting animation, and at the end of the animation, I could go to first, or I could have it destroy itself, or I could, restart the game, or I could do any number of things at the end of the animation. So when the animation is done, and that's really helpful for a lot of purposes. For instance, when you have an effect pop up and you want the end of that effect to do something like restart the game or recreate the player or something like that. It's great for spawning, and it's great for a projectile. When the animation's over, it goes away, or an effect like when a sword hits a monster and you want a little effect to pop up. When the animation's over with, it goes away. So that's sort of how you can do that. That's how the animation speed works. Now, these action step flags can do a multitude of things in your code. In fact, some of these are mislabeled already. This shouldn't say invincible anymore. It should say use alternate physics. This shouldn't say bouncy head anymore. This should say ignore gravity in the platform engine. And you can actually control all this from your project labels section. You can control what these say, and in the code you can control what they do, and that's a more advanced tutorial. But anyway, so that's this interface, and then your bounding box, obviously I would set it comparable to what you set the player to. So if you leave the player's head so he kind of has that space against solid objects, do the same thing with a monster object. So that's a basic look at the monster animation info box, the object info, I should say. Now, in order to place this in a game, like I said, if you've already saved it, it's automatically saving. If you see a little save button here, that means you better click it because you haven't saved this monster yet. And once you do save it, you need to make sure that you're still working on that monster by clicking on it. If I want to make a new monster, I'd go to monsters and I'd start from scratch. If I want to edit the one, I'd go on it, and you can see there's no save button here. If I want to put this monster in the game, I need to make a group out of him. And I have two monsters. I can put them both in the group like this. And I can call this mixed bugs or something, hit save. And now I have a monster group called mixed bugs. When I go to one of my screens, if I want those mixed bugs to appear, I would go to screen info. I'm looking at what monsters load during the normal type of day. This is non-triggered. It's how it is from the beginning of the game. I'd go to day monsters, and I would pick mixed bugs, and I would pick the palettes that I want to show. Now remember, I made a monster palette 1, and I didn't make anything for the second one. That's sort of what they looked like. I'm going to hit OK, and now I can place those monsters by right-clicking, place monster 1, and maybe place monster 2. Like that. And so right now you can only place 3 of the monsters. You will be able to place more and game objects on the screen. Right now it's just a quick limit. So if I were to play the game, these guys would show up right here and they would do the actions I told them to do. Real quick, what I could also do is if I wanted to check what happens when this screen is triggered. Now you can trigger a screen in all different methods. Like you can make it so when you collect all of a certain object, a screen gets triggered, or at the end of NPC dialogue, the screen type gets triggered. And it works on screen types, and there's 256 possible screen types. So you can really do a lot with triggers. What you've got is you've got the day monsters, but you've also got day monsters when the screen is triggered. So if I make a new monster group, and it's all bug 2s, and I put bug 2 group or something and save it, and I go to overworld. Now I can get into screen info and go to day triggered, and I could choose that bug 2 group and hit OK. And now if I go to day triggered, notice the monsters went away. I haven't placed any of these. If I right click and place them, you'll see I only get monster 2s. So that's how you can work with triggered versus non-triggered. We haven't really talked about day and night cycles yet, and that's something that we're going to talk about another time. But the same thing would apply. Like you basically have 4 different states that you can define different monsters or different objects on the screen, and that's how you can see what each state is going to look like. And if you watch the platform tutorial, you'll see me use triggered a screen trigger to get rid of monsters, and also to get rid of blocks that only go away when screens are triggered, so I can get to an area. So anyway, that's a quick look at monsters and how to use them and how to get them into your game. Before I leave, I just want to show you where these are. So all these actions are in routines, user scripts, AI action routines. So for instance, this is choose out of 8 directions. Number 01 is choose out of 8 directions, and this is the code for making it move in 8 directions. So when I'm looking at this, I'm really choosing from that list, from these scripts. And if I change these scripts and want to rename how they appear, I can actually do that in my labels. If I go to project labels and I go to action types, if I didn't want to call this move in 8 directions, I want to call this 8 directions yo, I could say 8 directions yo. And now when I look at object details, my choice is 8 directions yo. So as I change the code or upload my own codes or share codes with friends or whatever, and I want these to be able to do different things, I can get into my labels and actually change the name of them, and this will update, and that way I don't forget, oh yeah, what was behavior 11? I can't quite remember. So I'm encouraging people to start looking at the code and start trying to make some different things happen. And there's going to be tutorials on how to do things and different codes on the forums and things like that. So that's really fun. I hope you guys understand how to create a monster and how the basic interface works and how it differs from game objects.